Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective podcast, and I'm your host, Christopher Koerper. I'm going to read from an excerpt from the Encyclopedia of Underground Strength and Conditioning to kick us off. I was 3 or 4 years old, but it seems like it was only 3 or 4 minutes ago. The year, 1978 or 79. I lived in an apartment complex in Fords, New Jersey. My older brother and I were in the pool throwing our toy dinosaurs up in the air, trying to catch them and having a good old time. I accidentally threw my toy dinosaur out of the pool and over the fence. Outside the fence, there was a wooded area, and my brother and I ran to get my dinosaur. How we got on the other side of the fence is all a blur to me, but what happened when we began looking for the dinosaur is crystal clear. We weren't sure where the dinosaur was as we walked side by side, scanning the ground covered heavy by leaves on this perfect summer day. And in a split second, our moment of laughter and happiness came to a screeching halt when I got hit in the face by something. That something was hard and it hurt. It really freaking hurt. Boom. I got hit again and again and again. I began crying and screaming in pain, rocks hitting my face time and time again, 1 inch below my right eye. In the far distance, I saw the bad kids from the apartments throwing rocks at me. We were always told to stay away from these kids, and now I knew why. This assault was happening at the speed of light. In the pool 1 second, having a blast, would only seem like moments later being attacked with stones. I began grabbing at the ground and throwing anything in my hands their way, desperately hoping I could hit them back. I remember the exact thoughts running through my head. I was screaming at them to stop, yet questioning how they could keep hitting me with such perfect aim, despite being so far away. Every time I grabbed at the ground to throw a stone at them, my hands came up empty with nothing but leaves. Finally, my brother freaked out and grabbed me, pulling me to run away and escape to some form of safety. We began to run, and we never looked back as our voices screamed with frantic cries. As we were climbing over the fence to get home, one of the teenagers who was throwing rocks at me ran up to us and stopped at the fence. There we were, the three of us hanging on the fence side by side, and he asked me, "Zach, is it bad? Are you hurt bad?" I was crying as he looked at my face with a frightened look. As I clung to that fence, I screamed my answer, "Yes." I recall the shocked look on his face when he saw that he and his friends had done to my face. My brother and I ran home, told my parents what happened. As I cried out of fear and shock from what just happened, I asked my father, "Am I hurt bad? Does it look bad? Show me in the mirror." My father lifted me up in the bathroom so I could see my face in the mirror. My face was covered in blood. I was crying so much that I was wiping my face and my eyes from the tears, spreading the blood all over my face. I was rushed to the hospital where my brother told me, "Zach, just don't let them touch you." I cried as they stitched my face up right under my eye. I remember leaving the hospital with a surgical glove blown up in a smiley face with a smiley face on it. That is the earliest memory of life. It's my earliest memory of life. That is the first time I remember learning to fight back without backing down like a pit bull. If my brother hadn't pulled me away, I don't know if I would have had my right eye today. He saved me that day. That day taught me that even when you are outnumbered and smaller than your competition, you don't ever back down. When the dust settles and clears, it is those who stand up for what they believe in that rise above. And that is an excerpt from the Encyclopedia of Underground Strength and Conditioning by Zach Evanesh, who is joining us on the podcast today. Zach, welcome to the Strength Coach Collective. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, dude. It's crazy. That's what I remember. That's my first memory of life. Crazy.
How has that moment defined you as a coach?
Man, I haven't thought about that thing for a long time. I actually drove to that apartment complex maybe a year and a half ago. Sometimes when I go to my gym up in North Jersey, I'll sometimes like get off and exit to drive through where we grew up, just to kind of remember where I came from. I don't know if it's defined me as a strength coach, but I know just the area I grew up in, and I explained it actually to the high school kids today about, why I began doing push-ups and calisthenics as a kid was not because of why they do it, to look better, girls see your chest and arms big. It was not like that. There was just a lot of jerk off bully kids that if you weren't strong, you were going to get your butt kicked. And I started exercising out of fear. It's crazy. And so I explained to my own kids, I explain to the athletes, like, nobody's running around punching you in the face. It's not, nobody's bullying you. Nobody's threatening to find you after school and kick your ass. And so without that threat, like, training is, it's just not this thing that's constantly on your mind. And so for me, I started training like out of fear. I was afraid of what some of these kids in our town, in the high school, in the middle school would do. How has it shaped me as a coach? I don't know if it's that experience, but it's certainly been so many of my experiences, including, not just the bad things that happen, but the good things, the way the coaches coached me. I would also say the mistakes I made, the problems with my knee and my shoulder. I look back and say, well, we didn't know any better with this crazy high volume training and forced reps and negatives and all that. And now I know that doing any of that stuff is not going to preserve the athlete's body. And so I take, when I look at what I do as a coach, I don't look at, well, I started, coaching strength and conditioning in 2002. I look back to 1989 when I began, legitimately training or exercising. I wouldn't call what I did was I thought I was training, I didn't know what I was doing. But in 1989, the knowledge wasn't that good. And ironically, yesterday I was going through, so behind my desk, I've got my library and I've got stacks of old books. And so I was going through some old Ironman magazines from the 70s and 1980. And I'm like, man, this is actually what I needed. But those magazines were, Ironman became like this fitness bodybuilding. Whereas if you look in Ironman in the 70s and early 80s, it's powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, it's some strongman training, muscular development had strength and conditioning. Strength and Health magazine was created by Bob Hoffman of, York Barbell. In the late 80s, early 90s, it was Muscle and Fitness and Flex magazine. They ran the show. And so the wrong timing and getting the wrong information. And so all of these mistakes I've made blended with good experiences, they kind of all get blended together when I'm coaching.
So I think about the current state of health and fitness and just the amount of information that's out there for us as coaches.
Yeah.
When in the past it was magazines and books, now we have social media and the internet, and it's exploded the amount of information out there. What would your advice be to coaches, young coaches, who are navigating that information, how they can best progress and best coach? I think about that all the time now, because I'm a little bit younger, a little bit earlier on the path, and that's something that's quite challenging to navigate as a young coach.
Yeah. I've gotten, ironically, the podcast question I answered yesterday hits this topic, and then one of my former athletes from high school and college reached out to me, and I said, you need to research. Meaning, I think a lot of coaches get caught up, stuck on Instagram and YouTube. And a strength coach, even said this to me. He goes, Zach, like, people don't go to websites anymore. They go to Instagram and YouTube. And then I had a conversation with a buddy of mine who's in like video production. He goes, Zach, people absolutely do go to websites if the content is good. And I said, yeah, but some of these younger coaches, they don't really even know what a blog is. If they're in their 20s, they may not know what a blog is. When I was blogging in the early 2000s till I'd say like 2012, when like Instagram really took off, people started really leaving, blogs and just going on social sites. Like you said, I tell guys all the time, if you want to learn business, go to my website and type in business in the search button. If you want to learn about wrestling, type in wrestling. If you want to learn football, type football. If you want to learn plyometrics, go to my website and type that in. But what they do is they go to your website and they see what's on the front page, and that's it. They go to Instagram, they go to YouTube, and whatever's coming up on their feed, boom, that's it. I explain is you should go back to my first video on YouTube in 2006 and see what I was doing. And of course, there was a lot of mistakes, but there was a lot of powerful stuff there. And you want to be able to look at it and say, I could take this and this, but I'm not going to take, X, Y. I'll take A, B, C, but I'm not going to take X, Y, Z. So you need to be great at research versus only consuming what comes to your face because of the Instagram algorithm, the YouTube algorithm. You mentioned Jocko. You like a couple of Jocko videos. Now you're going to get more Jocko in your feed, and you're going to get more David Goggins and other Navy SEALs in your feed. But, how many of the young strength coaches have listened and studied, Al Vermeil or any of these, or Bob Hoffman? So a couple of years ago, it was like 2 years ago, year and a half ago, Play did like a whole throwback of videos with me called Iron Roots. I don't even think they have 1,000 views. And it's me like going to the origins of 5x5, which was Reg Park and then Bill Starr, a strength coach at a big Division I university, reached out to me, and he was watching those videos. He's like, dude, I didn't even know who, I can't remember who it was, but I did stuff on like Zuver's Gym, Dr. Ken Leisner, all of these people that paved the way. Dr. Ken was doing strongman training in like 1970, 1968. And so you want to research not so much just the information, but you want to know the men and the women who kind of paved the way. Like, I don't even know who the first collegiate female strength coach was. And there's not too many girls in strength and conditioning. It's very tough for them. And so for the women listening out there, they should dig that up and really research so they could learn what were their struggles. How did they overcome the struggles? What were the obstacles that they were able to transform into opportunity? And some of my older, my strength coaches that are older than me, they're like, man, you were born in the wrong era, Zach. They're like, you should have been probably like strength and conditioning in the 70s, the way you like dig into stuff. And so having that older information can make you a better strength coach. Even my own staff, they were doing box squats. And what's crazy is I've sent them information on box squats, stuff with Matt Wenning, with Louis Simmons, and they share videos, and everybody's doing a touch and go. And I had to send them, guys, that's not how we do a box squat. And ironically, a couple of years ago, I remember seeing at a big Division I university, touch and go box squats, which you could use the box as like a depth, check. You touch and go if somebody's struggling with depth, but it's supposed to be different than a regular squat. You're supposed to sit back, your trunk is stable. Then you're supposed to pause for a second. And lucky for me, this won't happen today. In the early years of the early 2000s, I would call Louis Simmons every week and be on the phone with him, on the phone. And then I would buy stuff from him. I would buy his VHS tapes, and I would watch them over and over and over and really learn. And even when I came across Westside Barbell the first time, I printed out every article and put it in a 3-ring binder. Those articles were the ones that he was writing for Powerlifting USA. Powerlifting USA was around when I was bodybuilding in the late 80s. But in the gym I was in, even though it would have been great for strength and conditioning powerlifting, there was like 5 powerlifters in there. One guy was kind of like short and fat. Another guy was tall and skinny. Nobody had this kind of like appealing look to them. So it didn't, pull me in. But I always say, man, if I would have came across Louis' information at those younger years, it would have transformed the trajectory of my own, high school sports experience. And then I would have had less injuries, and I probably would have, wrestled in college, or just, all of these things. So I think coaches today need to shut the internet off, right? Or shut the social apps off and go and dig up some of the older stuff. I think I was lucky, Chris, in my earlier years in that the place to really get written, knowledge on the internet, strength and conditioning was Elite FTS. That was kind of the main go-to. And so I came across Jim Wendler, Dave Tate. Being in New Jersey, of course, I knew of Joe DeFranco. And so that was where I got my information from. Now you have so much information. And what's a little bit tricky is, a strength coach who's 25 years old hasn't gone through the mileage. Like I'm 45. I started training at age 13. So I'm training almost 32 years. So I'm training longer than a 25-year-old strength coach has been alive. So I've seen infinitely more squats and little nuances. And so maybe our physiques at age 45 don't match, the Instagram guy who's 22, but the experience is what you want to take from us. I often say we didn't have no video camera to record what I was doing in my late teens and early 20s. And I always say, wow, I wish I could have shared it. But now it's more of just sharing the experiences. And so coaches who are, recently I deleted the social apps off my phone. It's just good to take a break because then I could go back to these old books and magazines. They're not on this desk, but on my desk at my high school, I have a lot of the old stuff. I just bought this. This just came today. This is an old book. Nice. 3 more reps. This is a reprint though. That's something kind of like bummed out. I thought it was an original. And so the photos are not as like gloss as I wish they were, but it's all these bodybuilding routines. And I still use bodybuilding methods for athletes because a lot of them don't have the muscle mass because they're not, 10, 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we always say as kids nowadays, blah, blah, blah. Well, kids played more. They also had manual labor jobs. Lots of kids were mowing lawns and working for, the local lawn care company. And so they were doing yard work very often, working for the landscaper. They don't. And so when you get a high school athlete, they can't squat, which is like saying, dude, you would struggle to sit on the toilet bowl. And so you need to do bodybuilding methods. And so I take bodybuilding, I take I take weightlifting, I take powerlifting, I take calisthenics and blend all that stuff together. So Chris,
that's what I love about what
I'm
you
bad
do.
At answering questions concisely. So it was like a 15-minute answer.
Well, there's so much value there. And the blending of those different methods is a result of how much you've studied and researched and practiced and tested in real time these different ideas and concepts. As I've coached athletes in my gym, I will learn something through research, and oftentimes I'll apply it to my own training,
right,
and experience it myself as a coach. And see how it feels. And then I can more greatly say to these guys, hey, here's not only the reason behind why we would apply this method, but here's what you can expect to feel as a result. So being under the bar, in addition to real research, can be just so valuable. And you're a great example of that in all of your content on social media, which is great, but also just in the things that you've written and what you've put out there on your website and everywhere else. So it's like in society, we forget our history and our roots. Yes. We can go off course, and such is the case in strength and conditioning.
Yep.
We forget our roots, or we don't even know what they are, where things come from.
Yeah.
The depth isn't there. And I think then we can bounce from thing to thing or chase a shiny object.
We totally can. And what you said, Chris, so I just want to jump in on that about you doing the workout. If there's a coach who's going to intern at my private facilities, they spend the first 2 to 4 weeks only lifting. They don't they don't just shadow me. So they shadow me for the first groups, and then they lift with the last group for a couple reasons. Why the last group? Because sometimes as a strength coach, your day is so crazy, you didn't get in your own workout, but you still got to live the code and do the thing that you're talking about. You need to almost learn is it the best thing to train when you're tired? No. But if you're a strength coach, oftentimes our schedules are just not optimal or even healthy, and you got to get that workout in. Number two, if they train at 4 o'clock and then they're sweaty and exhausted, now they can't focus for the 5 and 6. And so they train with an athlete group, a high school group. Then maybe a week later, they train only with the middle school groups, and they learn what it's like to not touch a barbell, but to just do a ton of sleds and calisthenics and medicine ball work and jumping and, moving like a kid. Then the next week they'll train with the adults, and then they learn what it's like to do a ton of like prehab for the knees, the shoulders, the back. And okay, we're training with a lot of women, so we're going to do, a lot of lower body, a lot of abs. That's what they like. Oh, we're training with athletes. Guess what you're going to do all the time? Arms. They start learning these kind of different nuances. And when I was at Rutgers, I saw some of the interns, and they looked like they didn't lift. And I'm thinking to myself, man, they got to train with a group. They got to get under a bar, because you cannot explain to somebody how to squat. If you are not struggling, you don't know what it's like to grind out reps. You don't know what it's like to train when you're tired and manipulating your nutrition. So you have to do all these different things. And like you said, you learn from lifting. You learn when you're coaching, I got the same team at 4 and 5, but the 4 o'clock group is way different than the 5 o'clock group personality wise. Now I got to coach them differently. Same sport, same everything. So there's so many nuances, which makes strength and conditioning exciting. It makes it like really cool that you feel like you're never smart enough. It's a lot of times at night, I'm down here, I'm maybe doing some programming, and I'm like, dude, I got to get better. And then it's like, how many guys who are, my first coaching job was 1995 at a hospital fitness center, 1995. So now it's 2021. So 26 years ago. I don't know how many accountants in their 26th year are like, I got to get better at these numbers, maybe. But in strength and conditioning, we're so, fired up and passionate. That's what's crazy, is like, I still feel like I'm young in this game, but, if you're in the college sector, they want young guys. They look at a 45-year-old like he's old school. He's washed up meathead. He's just, about lifting weights. We're in our industry, or our field is strange, to put it lightly.
Creating buy-in is so vital, and that you talk a little bit about that with your staff, and having them actually be under the bar, be training in their internships. What about, and I'm sure there's a lot more there with staff and how you handle them as a coach and a leader. What about athletes? See,
That's tough. Yeah.
they're exposed to so much information, just like we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
Mainly YouTube and Instagram. One of the questions I ask people when they apply to train at my spot is, what are the top apps you use on your phone, and how long are you on them per day? And it's very interesting to see where kids are spending their time. And like, TikTok, Snapchat, there's a lot of fitness workout content on there, and it's like 10 seconds, 15 seconds long. And a lot of these young athletes are high school, college athletes are following different things. But so how do you create buy-in? When they're seeing all these different these things, they come to you. What's your process? I'm really, really curious to hear what your thoughts are on that.
It's kind of, first of all, I struggle with that. I have certainly not anywhere near mastered it. Sometimes I'm struggling with it in like, I suck at it. So, we have the private facilities. That's different than when I'm at the high school or when I was at the college level. So at the private facility, it's like the parents have to go through the website and sit down with their son or daughter and show them, this is what it takes. Our website is like a pretty strict who we are for, who we are not for. Then they do a trial, which I very bluntly explain to them is like, it's a tryout to see your effort. I don't care how athletic you are. That's going to be our job, but you have to follow through on this work. You mentioned Jocko. He always, extreme ownership. You take the blame for everything. I've been thinking about that a lot. And some of the athletes at the high school I coach at, they are to blame for their own weakness, not me.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't stopped them from showing up. Maybe I'm tough on them and maybe that stops them from showing up. But I always say, what thing is not tough if I'm trying to be great at it, let alone good? So at the private sector, most of the time, we have kids that follow through and want to do the work. Here and there, some of them slip. Maybe they get a first girlfriend and they lose all focus. Maybe their social network, their friends are kind of pulling them away. And now they are the only one doing kind of after school activity that's taking them away from their friends. And their friends are like, listen, that place is stupid. Just come with me. We'll go to, this gym or that gym. You could do the same. It's all the same stuff. And so sometimes we'll lose kids. But for the most part, at the private sector, they have goals and their actions are matching those goals. And we're basically providing the vehicle. We're coaching them. I'm pushing them. And I tell them, I will push you because I care about your success, period. My job is to protect you. So if you're not following through on the nutrition and the training, then I explain to them, then somebody else out there is doing it better and possibly going to hurt you. You play football, you play lacrosse, you're a wrestler. They're coming to, they're going to inflict their physicality on you. So I need to protect you in that way. Now, at the college level, so interesting. You were talking about training and like getting under that bar. When I was at Rutgers, I had two groups. And I don't know why it was split up a certain way. It could have been class schedules and whatnot. But I can't remember, it was the first, I think it was the second group I would have. We had some fifth year seniors in there. We just had a different energy that I wasn't like feeling was popping compared to the first group. We would go 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. And so I said to the head associate coach, I said, man, I feel like I'm always more motivated than they are. I go, I think I might train with them one day and just show them like what training should look like. And so I'm 45. So at that time, I guess I was like 42, 41 maybe. And I go, cardinal sin is in college. You do not train with your own athletes. That is their time. He goes, Zach, let me tell you something. This is your program. And if you think that that's what you have to do to get them to perform and to, elevate, their training, then you do that. He goes, it's your program. And I was like, all right, I'm going to train with them. And I remember the first day I was training with them and I was just working so hard and I'm like talking smack and I'm like, I'm smoking you guys. I'm twice your age and I'm smoking. I'm like, it's too easy. I'm like, I'm going to come back in my next life and destroy you guys. Like, this is so easy. I'm squatting more. I remember I was so sore for like days. I was just like, oh my God, I'm like crippled after training with those guys. You forget what it's like to be 21, 22. I don't even know. Maybe one kid's 23. You've got no injuries. You've got all the energy in the world. And I trained with that group for quite a long time. Not all the time, but quite often. It was extremely hard for me to do that with them. I didn't do the crazy warm-ups. I would have them do like all the gymnastics work, but that's what it took. I don't know if they felt like this is some guy saying stuff, but I had to get in it with them and like spot them and they spot me. And then, all right, you feel that? Now let's try it this way. Okay. And also at the college level, so many different personalities. So a kid might text me at night and say, Coach, can we work on some fast twitch stuff? I feel like I got to get faster. And that's their language. They don't really know what they're saying. Just like a parent of an athlete will often say speed and agility, or they'll say core strength. they don't really know what they're saying, but you don't want to argue and say, there's no such thing as core, it's the trunk. You don't want to say that, right? So I say, absolutely. We're going to get in some fast twitch work tomorrow. So during the warm up, I make sure we're jumping more, throwing more medicine balls.